In this video, we are going to be covering the topic of arrays and slices within Go. Now, arrays are a data structure that effectively allow us to store a group or a list of elements together in the one variable. So effectively, if we had a list of integers that we wanted to store, we could create an array and store the integers 1, 2, 3, 4, and this would effectively be an array of size 4 with a type of int. Now, if we wanted to declare an array of type string within Go, we could do something like the following. So we could say the name of the array. In this case, let's create an array of planets. We could then specify the size. So there are 8 planets within the solar system. We then want to specify the type that we wish to store within this array. So we're going to be storing strings. So we'll use string. And then we can populate the array like so. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Now, let's say we wanted to print out this array of planets. Now, we can't use the print line built-in function that we've been using so far, as it doesn't accept this type of variable. So let's use the format package dot println method and pass in planets like so. Now, on saving that, it's going to automatically add the import to the top of the file for me. If it hasn't for you, then please remember to add this. And then let's go into the terminal and try and run this. So go run main.go. And as you can see, using this format.println method, we've been able to print out all of the elements within our planets array. Cool. So in this example, we've used the shorthand declaration to instantiate our array, but you can also use the more verbose approach, and you could do something like planets array, just to give it a different name. And then we could do something like the size, so 8 and string. And then we could populate this array one at a time using planets array and the index at which we want to populate. So everything starts at 0. So let's do planets array 0 equals Mercury. And then let's do fmt println planets array like so. Go run main.go in the terminal, and you should see that it has printed out the array, and there's lots of empty spaces for the empty elements of the array. However, it does have the first element populated, which is Mercury. Cool, so we've covered arrays and how you can instantiate them using both the shorthand method and the more verbose approach. Now, let's take a look at the slices concept within Go. Now, slices can be instantiated like so. So let's say planets, or planet slice, is equal to something like this. And again, we can steal all of the elements from our planets array up at the top. And then we can do fmt println planet slice. Now, the key difference between the planet slice object that we have here and the planets array that we have at the top here is that we haven't specified the size within this square brace here. Now, it's this syntax that denotes that whatever we're creating on this side is going to be a slice, and the Go compiler is going to treat it as such. So we've looked at the shorthand method for generating a slice in Go. Let's look at the more verbose approach now. So var planet slice verbose. Again, empty square braces denoting that this is going to be a slice of type string. And then in order to append elements to the slice that we've got here, we're going to have to use the key or the built-in function append. So let's do planet slice verbose equals append planet slice verbose, and the first element is going to be Mercury. And then finally, let's do fmt println planet slice verbose, and then let's run this within the terminal. So go run main.go. And as you can see, it's printed out the array, the second array, the first slice, and then the second verbose slice that we've just created here. Now, one of the key advantages of using a slice over an array is that under the covers it will perform the automatic resizing of the array structure that it will be using. So the append function has a lot of built-in functionality and handles all of the resizing logic for us. Cool, so that's all we're going to be covering within this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can take this a step forward and start to iterate over all of the elements within slices and arrays using for loops. So in the last video, we looked at the topic of arrays and slices and how they are subtly different in Go. Now in this video, we are going to be taking a look at for loops and doing things like iterating over the contents of a slice. Now let's start off with creating a new slice, and we'll call it ages, and it will be a slice of type int, and let's populate it with a couple of ages, so 42, 28, 30, 27, and 18, let's say. Now, using a for loop, we could do the following. So for I is equal to 0, I is less than the length of ages, I++. We could then do fmt.println and ages, and then we could use the I as the index for the item that we want to print out. So let's go into the terminal and run this. Go run main.go. And as you can see, using a for loop, we have been able to iterate over each of these elements within this slice and print them out using the format.println statement here. Now, if you've programmed in any other language before, you should be familiar with this syntax, as it's the same sort of syntax that we use in other languages like JavaScript. We initialize the index, we then set the condition, so whilst I is less than the length of the object that we're iterating over, and then we increment I for every time this loop executes. Now with Go, we have slightly more flexibility when it comes to incrementing our for loops, so we could do something like for I is equal to 0, I is less than the length of ages, and then we could open up the body of our for loop, and then within here we'd be able to control the incrementing of the I variable. So we could do ages, I, and then I++ within the body of the for loop. Let's try run this. Go run main.go. And we see that both for loops have basically achieved the same results. We've been able to iterate through all of the objects within this ages slice and print them out. It's just we've had slightly different means of incrementing the I index. Now, if you're coming from other programming languages, then you may be familiar with the concept of a while loop or a do while loop. Now, in Go, there is no real comparison. Instead, we can use for loops without any expression, and when a certain condition is met, we can then call the break command. And the break command will effectively just break out of the body of this for loop and continue on with the execution of the rest of our program beneath it. Now, this approach is good for terminating the execution of a for loop and exiting out of the body of the for loop. However, what happens if we want to simply continue to the next iteration of a for loop? Well, let's take the example of when we want to print out only even numbers. So let's do for I is less equals 0, I is less than 10, I++. We could do if I modulo 2 does not equal 0, continue. Otherwise, let's print out the I, like so. Let's give this a shot. So go run main.go. And as you can see at the bottom of our execution, 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. So every time the I modulo 2, or I divided by 2, is not 0, we then continue on to the next iteration and skip the format.println. And then when this condition isn't met, it simply skips over it and executes the print line. So before we move on to the next video in this course, there is one final thing I'd want to cover, and that is the range keyword. So using the range keyword, we can effectively create a for loop that returns both the index and the value whenever we range over a slice. So we can do fmt.println the index and fmt.println the value, like so. Now, this is somewhat new syntax for those of you following along with this course, but effectively what we've been able to do here is map the output of a command on range ages to two distinct variables. So for every iteration of the ages slice here, we map the index. So for example, 42 will have the index 0 as it is the first element of the array. The value will then be mapped as 42. For 28, the index would be 1. The value would be mapped to 28. 30, 2, 30, 27 would be 3, 27, and 18 would be 4 and 18. Now let's see this in action by running this within the command line. So go run main.go. Let's scroll up. And as you can see, it does print out the index for each element in the slice, as well as the value. Cool, so in this video, we've had a comprehensive look at for loops in Go. We've looked at how we can range over the elements of an array or a slice. We've looked at the traditional way of declaring for loops, and we've looked at how we could use for loops in place of while loops. Now in the next video, we are going to be taking a look at the concept of functions in Go.